Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Today I want to compare two Synology NASes, one the refresh of the other, and whether it is that you are looking at upgrading your older generation NAS that you may have purchased 2016, 2018, 2020 towards the newer generation, or this is your first tippy toes into the world of private server ownership because you've been paying for your subscription cloud from Google Drive, Dropbox and the rest for years upon years and realised you got to get something physical. Every possibility means that you have arrived at this video because you are comparing the summer 2020 released DS220 Plus and you're wondering whether it is worth going for that because it is still available, or going for the newly announced DS224 Plus from Synology. But before we go any further, just a quick disclaimer straight off the bat. At the time of recording this, the DS224 Plus has not been officially released. We know about it, we know the specs, and we've already seen early indications of the prices, stuff that we'll talk about in this video. But right now, the reason I'm releasing this before the DS224 Plus fully releases is because a lot of you are on the fence and you're looking at buying a new NAS now and you've looked at all the specs and look at integrated graphics and the price and you've got really close to buying the DS220 Plus, but just at the 11th hour have just gone, oh, what is this other one arriving here on the scene? So this is not the DS224 Plus. We will have it in the studio as soon as it's launched. I believe it's going to arrive around August 2023. But for now, we're utilising this as a place setting, but don't worry, all of the specifications we're going to talk about, and it will become abundantly clear later on, we already know them, and we know exactly what they're capable of. Again, it will become clear why later in the video. But before we go any further, real quick off the bat, regardless of either one of these two NASs you go for, you are 100% guaranteed to have the following. 1. You will have full unfettered access to Synology's DSM platform. Currently in version DSM 7.2, both the 220 and the 224 Plus. By the way, I will occasionally call it the 223 Plus by accident throughout the course of this video because we've known about it for a little while, and for a long time it was known as the DS223 Plus. It was only seemingly in the last few months that it's changed into the latest 224 Plus name, so I apologise in advance for how many times I'm going to get that wrong throughout this video. Both of them run the DS 7.2 version of Synology software. That's the entire collaboration suite of applications, the surveillance apps, the virtual machine apps, the backup applications, and things like Synology Hybrid RAID, BTIFS, and more. So regardless of which one you go for, you're going to get that full complement of software. On top of that, you are getting a 2-bay NAS system, so you've got your RAID failover there. Neither one of them support expansions, more on that later on, but you can still migrate this data onto a newer, larger NAS later down the line. They also support USB storage, although USB support has changed a little bit over time. I hate seagulls. And both of them arrive with 2 years of manufacturer's warranty, and both of them support a myriad of third-party client applications and their own range of Synology first-party applications and services. But you didn't come here to know what they got in common. You came here to know what's different and which one's better for your bunts, right? So let's crack on. Now, when it comes to how much you're actually weighing out for these two devices, we've got to be realistic. We are comparing a device that has been in the market for over 3 years versus a device that is just about to drop. Consequently, price-wise comparisons can be tough, and I'm sure you've found that as well, because when a new device arrives, it is so close to the RRP recommended retail pricing that you end up with a device that seemingly looks fantastically more expensive than any other device you're comparing against with this much pedigree. However, once you really break down, and we'll go into more later on with regard to the hardware, the similarities between these devices, the price disparity between them is particularly noticeable here. To put that into some perspective, we're anticipating, and for all the indications we've seen online from early pricing that's appeared, as well as price in the channel, which is that kind of distribution network, we see that the DS224 is gonna knock around for about 330 to about 350, maybe 360 nicker. And again, when I say nicker, I mean your pounds, your dollars, your euros, those there, which is, you know, currency conversions are getting thinner and thinner. Thank you very much, global economic crisis. So I'm just going to say nicker for now because it's easier. Now, the DS22 Plus, you know, it arrived at that price back in 2020 when it first rolled out. It arrived knocking around on there. But the minute you look at things like Amazon price charts, you start looking at kind of comparative pricing over time, and a lot of those graphs that you find online, you find that that price has come down substantially, and now you can pick up this device quite comfortably in a number of different retailers for about $299. And again, I'm going to say dollars on that occasion because America seems to have this unit on offer a lot more than anywhere else. Now, more so than that, not only do you regularly see it knocking around, again, for about the 280 quid to maybe 320 quid mark, but you also see it arriving more and more second hand. Because a lot of users, when they first got it, they started using it, and of course, because it doesn't support expansions, and their growing needs, and the fact that because it's a 2-bay, it means that you're traditionally going to put it in an SHR or a RAID 1, meaning you're going to halve your storage. A lot of users, once it reached beyond the 2-year limit, because that's the 2-year hardware manufacturer's guarantee, they started thinking, do you know what, I'm going to go for something bigger anyway, because my business has expanded and so has my storage. So then they sell off the old one to recoup the old bunts. And when they do that, you get even better offers knocking around for about $250 to about $270, $280 nicker floating around. So it's actually possible to get the older generation device. Remember, running DSM almost exactly the same amount as the newer generation device. You can get this second-hand pretty darn cheap. And the prices we see online are particularly competitive as well. So overall, in terms of pricing and what you're getting for your money, at least in terms of hardware, it makes the DS22 Plus actually a very, very attractive offer in terms of value. Because although you are getting certain improvements on the DS224 that we'll talk about in the hardware section, I would say overall, in terms of price and value for money, the DS22 Plus, at least for now, is by far the better choice. And if that is your decision point right now, when you're weighing up between something that is available and something that's not released yet, definitely this one has that edge for you. But just bear in mind that as time wears on, 3-6 months down the line, as availability starts to drop on this device and the DS224 Plus becomes the status quo, that balance will shift. Now, comparing hardware between these two devices is something of a tall order. Now, why is that? Well, nice and simple, they are really, really similar. Given the 3 years difference between these, the difference in hardware is incredibly small. Now, to give Synology a little bit of the benefit of the doubt there, the reason for that is that in the last year to year and a half, they have completely reshaped their portfolio. And the old status quo that existed when the 220 arrived on the market of having your basic level, entry level, then you had your value series, then you had your home prosumer, and then you had your prosumer premium early business. That was their portfolio. Now that changed when they released this, and we're going to talk about this later on, the DS723 Plus in another comparison. And this was when the prosumer business tier reshaped. They removed a bunch of their value series options in like the Play and the J series. They then also introduced the home tier much lower, or that prosumery home tier much lower. And we started to see the hardware that we largely associated in the past with the prosumer early business tier, such as a quad-core Celeron, start to arrive at a lower accessible tier. They basically moved that tier down in terms of hardware availability. And when they reshaped that portfolio, you've ended up now in 2022-2023 with this weird disparity between revisions when the upgrades from the 2020 series into the 2022-2023 series seem all out of whack. And this is a great example of that. Why is that? Because despite the 3-year difference between these two devices, the CPU is the same CPU family, released the same time. It's not the same CPU, but it's the same CPU family, with this being the dual-core J4025 and this being the J4125 quad-core. Same CPU, same family, same TDP to the most part when you take into account the cores and more, and for a lot of users, that's going to be quite disappointing because that CPU has already been fully featured on a number of different Synology NAS releases in the last 2 to 3 years. Also, that CPU is from 2019 release from Intel, and since then Intel have moved on to other generation Intel Celerons in their product portfolio there, and Synology seems to be really overly relying on this CPU in their solutions, providing it within the last year or so within their surveillance NAS, the DVA1622, and the CPU arriving on the DS423 as well. So that CPU is better than the CPU inside the DS220 Plus, but not by a tremendous degree. It's a quad core rather than a dual core. It drops the performance, the overall clock speed a fraction, with a dual core at 2.0 GHz that can be burst when needed up to 2.9, and the quad core inside the DS224 Plus arriving at 2.0 GHz as well, but it can be burst only up to 2.7. So a small 200 MHz difference, with integrated graphics between the two of them largely the same, give or take 50 megahertz. So again, between the two of them, the CPU is better, and having more cores means you can allocate them to other things. Alongside those cores, also allowing you for the system to be able to juggle more things at any given time. So whether you do it manually or automatically, there are inherent benefits, but not a huge amount to the smaller scale average typical user. Only when you're going to push the boundaries. More on that on the software section. But in the case of the DS220 Plus, you're still getting a very efficient and capable CPU. And next, let's talk about the memory. Hell, let's talk about the ports. Let's talk about everything, because frankly, I'm not even going to talk about the ports comparison between these two, because they are identical. Not only do both of them arrive with two 1 gig Ethernet ports, so there's been no upgrade beyond 1 GBE. They both got exactly the same USB connectivity on either side, with the USB being 5 gig USB, not 10 gig USB. And also DSM has kind of lowered down what you can do with USBs beyond UPSs and storage devices. So you can't even upgrade the network ports via that USB to maybe 1 gig or even 2.5 gig with supported adapters there. And although there is support of SMB multi-channel, it's the same on both of them. Now, that's what I mean about the hardware between them. It's incredibly similar. You may have noticed I've not mentioned the memory yet. And why have I not mentioned the memory? Because, again, it's eye-chuffing identical. They both arrive with 2 gig of DDR4 memory soldered to the board, so you can't upgrade it. And they both arrive with a single internal SODIMM slot on the inside there. And that SODIMM slot allows you to install a Synology non-ECC 2666 MHz memory upgrade. So inside there, this system then also arrives with the same level of memory 3 years later on this newer generation device, which really lowers the scope for what you can do with it. So you can't even install more memory despite the CPU inside this device, and indeed this device, supporting up to 8 gig maximum. You have to go for this weird 2 and 4 gig combo, which is really odd to me, to miss out on the potential extra 2 gig of memory officially. So between the two of them, in terms of hardware, yes, the hardware on the DS224 Plus, it is better. It's a quad core rather than a dual core, so you've got more stuff to play with there. But it doesn't arrive with a larger base level memory, and the CPU is still the 2019 generation. So it wins this round in a kind of quasi-yay way. And just to put that CPU into perspective, when I was getting set up for this video, and I was going back to some of my original notes and templates when I was looking at my 2020 stuff, to get some of the calculations and see how that CPU may have depreciated in price, or what Synology been able to do with it, with the performance, I suddenly found that CPU, when you look outside of the Synology ecosystem, the availability, I found that CPU and an 8 gig memory built into a mini PC HDMI stick for 159 quid. With Windows 11 on board, you can get mini PCs with that CPU, 8 gig of memory, couple of USB ports, and Windows 11 license rolled in, just boop, in the back of your TV or any monitor there. Now, that's phenomenal. You know, of course, it doesn't have multi-LAN support, and if you were going to use it as a NAS, you're really missing out, and it's going to rely on Wi-Fi only. But I'm just putting into perspective just how much that CPU is changing hands for online in terms of value as a component. And I'm still kind of disappointed that Synology are holding on to that. Now, yes, Synology are handing down this hardware architecture from what was previously the premium prosumer tier onto the home value prosumer tier. in their reshuffle of their portfolio. But still, nonetheless, the DS224 Plus wins this, but I'm not exactly overjoyed about it. Which brings us to the software section of the video, because obviously this is going to be relatively short, and frankly, spoiler alert, the DS224 Plus is going to win it, but not in that kind of, yeah, you won overall kind of a way. And again, we can blame a lot of that on the way Synology have reshuffled their portfolio in this interim, and we have to at least respect that. But still, nonetheless, DSM runs exactly the same on both of these devices for the typical user. It runs exactly the same applications. You can get BTRFS or ext4. You got your encrypted volumes in DSM 7.2. You got your immutable backups with write once, read many support. Your collaboration suite of apps of chat, mail, drive, etc. You've got SHR support, so when you expand later down the line, you'll be able to take advantage of that mixed drives RAID capacity in a way you can't really on the 2-bay on day one. Again, virtual machines, container manager there, surveillance there, you've got hyper backup, active backup, you've got all of those C2 integrated services, Synology hybrid high availability there, and of course the multimedia suite of Synology Photos with that AI facial recognition there. You've got a video station with comparative transcoding and metadata scraping. You've got their audio station application, which also works with Alexa and services like that. And of course, you've got Plex Media Server support on these devices. So how do we differentiate between them? Because even when we look at DSM support, both of these have got full-time support of DSM on them. Now, maybe later down the line, we might see a slight difference of 6 to 12 months between them in how long older generation DSM versions are supported on them. But it's going to be very, very small indeed because of the similarity in their hardware architecture there. On top of that, when it comes to the extent of the hardware on these, you're only going to see, once you really max these devices out, any difference in favour of the DS224 Plus. What do I mean by that? Because the DS224 Plus has got that quad core which can either be manually allocated internally with regard to things like VMs and containers and allocating those resources, or the system will intelligently have more cores with which to deviate tasks and services in the background on the DS224 Plus in a way that doesn't have the same extent on the DS220 Plus. But again, you'll only really feel that when you're maxing the device. Typically, when you're using it, the Synology will try to be as efficient as possible in the days, weeks, months, and years that it is in operation. And consequently, unless you're going to have a larger user base, larger task base, and active process base, the advantages, even in something like Plex with the quad-core device, aren't going to be exceptionally high to the typical user compared with that of the DS220 Plus. So consequently, the 224 Plus does win the software comparison, but not by a huge degree. Ultimately, unless this is on a better price point and you're weighing them both up, because you still have to factor in the price of support, the price of warranty, and the price of something new versus something old there, the DS224 Plus isn't giving you a huge advantage over the DS220 Plus. So if you are making this first step into buying a new Synology NAS, then if it's brand new day one, I'd probably still say go for the DS224 Plus. But if the DS220 Plus is at a very attractive and notable different price point between them and is in new or near new condition, the 220 Plus is still an incredibly attractive proposition in the same way that a lot of users still look for the DS920 Plus, which has this same CPU to this day, because they know there are good availability and pricing on that with the NVMe structure and everything rolled in there. Basically, if you're buying today and you're buying new, the DS224 Plus is worth holding out for a fraction longer, but only if you don't see this on any offer. We saw this on offer on multiple locations during Prime Day at websites like B&H. We shouldn't even, competitive pricing against Amazon, arriving, I believe, at $250 up to $299, which was an incredibly attractive offer. So offers like that are reasons worth going for the older generation box. But unless it's on offer, I'd maybe hold out for the DS224 Plus, because though the advantages are very, very small, it's a new product, it's going to have that warranty rolled in, and ultimately that's going to be the most attractive proposition for many users. but in most other regards, the difference between them is very, very small. Thank you so much for watching. There should be a comparison link below over on NAS Compares that goes into more detail about these, and when the full release of the DS224 Plus arrives, if we need to revisit this comparison, I will, but I think there isn't going to be much more to tell you than I already know, because we've already extensively tested this architecture in previous generation devices. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, click like. If you need free advice, use the free advice section, the big blue button on the right hand side of the page on NAS Compares. Use the free community forum, Ask NAS Compares, or you can use our Discord to help you along the way. And finally, if you found this video helpful, please use the links in the description if you plan on going to those stores. Again, only if you found a vid helpful, and only if you're going to go to those stores. Because if you use those links, it will take you to those stores. It costs you nothing extra, and anything, and I mean anything you buy, will result in a small amount of money coming back here from those stores to us here at NAS Compares. It's just me and Eddie here doing what we do, and that really helps us provide the free advice and keep making content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.